Hello everyone, this is Ted from Zplay, and I'm happy to be here for this hypergame conference and bring some of our understanding for idle arcade games, which is the new genre in hyper-casual market. And also, we are bringing some tips for studios who would like to try some games in this genre. Right. Firstly, a quick introduction about Zplay and myself. So Zplay is a global mobile casual game publisher who focuses on hyper-casual games. So far, we've achieved global downloads for over 600 million, and we have partners and studios from over 20 countries in the world. And for myself, I'm positioning as publishing director in Zplay, and me and my team are very dedicated to helping studios to become more successful and bring your games to millions of users. Okay, so for idle arcade games, we would like to also talk about our Stone Miner because it's our first hit, and we achieved some score for this game. Stone Miner has been top one for both Android Store and the iOS Store for over 20 days, and it achieved more than 35 million global downloads just in 4 months. And you also have gross revenue for over $8 million. So actually, it's pretty impressive one. So before we talk about the deconstruction of idle arcade games, we also would like to talk about the emerging of idle arcade games. So very coincidentally, Zplay we previously published some pure idols as well, like Idle Home Makeover and Idle Digging games. These games are also very successful and very profitable. And but right now you can see very limited idle games who can top charting because of the high CPI issue. But idle arcade games, in our opinion, just solved this issue because of the renewed control for the game. It makes the gameplay more dynamic and more playable. Um, the players has the full control to explore in the game. So it makes the game more engaging and also cause the lower CPI and better scalability in the market. Plus, idle arcade games keeps the progression and also upgrades from idle games, and the result will be it has better playtime and also higher monetization compared with the common hyper casual games. Then it comes to today's main topic, the deconstruction of idle arcade games. So I'm trying to summarize some key features we've seen from some potential prototypes we tested and also some hit games in the market we've seen. And here are 3 points we would like to share with you guys. They are the resources, the core loop, and also the monetization. Let's start with them one by one. Firstly, the resources. So if you guys ever played some idle arcade games in the market, you will see that most of them they're starting with resources. So some resources are natural resources, for example, farming and milk, wood, mining, or those are very common resources in the nature. And some resources are manufacturers, for example, toys, factories, some crafted items like a burger, pizza, they're manufactured items and resources. And some resources are going pretty wild, for example, kryptons or a crowd of people. They can also be the resources, or even coffee. Recently, I just saw a prototype who made coffee as their main resources. So literally anything can be the resources in idle arcade games. And also here are some great examples for for each class. The first one is a natural one. You can see there can be ore, there can be wood, there can be oil, and also corn. These are the natural resources. And the manufacturers, for example, cars, shopping bags, brakes, or pills. And for others, like we mentioned, crypto or money, players can directly collecting money in the game and or even land. That player you can use a special approach to land in the game. So after discuss the resources, it naturally comes with the question: what are the good resources? What are the bad resources for idle arcade games? So to our opinion, we don't think there's a certain benchmark to judge good or bad resources, because resources are also tied with the collecting approach. We will discuss that later. But if we're trying to generate some benchmark or preference, then we would like to suggest studios that try to make your resources understandable, and also make sure that your resources can be accepted by the wild audience. And if your resources can be trendy, it has some trendy elements, it could be better. Then the second feature we would like to share with you guys about the deconstruction of idle arcade game will be the core loop. So when we tried many solid prototypes and hit games in the market, we find that all these games are sharing a similar core loops. So let's study them together. The This page are talking about the three recent idle arcade hits, and all of them are very popular in the market and quite successful, right? If you try to compare with them, you can easily find some similarities among these titles. And within the similarities are the first one, it basically from the first insight, you can already understand the resources in the game. And secondly, you can understand clearly what the activity is happening in the game. And the third part would be player is very easy to understand what the resources will be used for. So the usage of resources is also clear, right? So we try to summarize and make it concise, and then we come up with this core loop for idle arcade games, which is idle arcade games. It starts with the resources, and then it comes to how to collect resources, and then it comes to how to consume these resources, and these three steps compose this core loop for idle arcade games. And among them, the second one is the most important, this collection of resources, because it gives players certain ASMR feeling. And if one game has very good collecting resources, even player just repeat doing this collection will still be engaging enough. And also, this resources collection will be the key to make your CPI lower. And for the third step about consumption of resources, actually it's more about giving players enough upgrades and giving them goals to help achieve long-term retention. If we use this formula and this loop to track the previous mentioned heat games, you can find actually they're pretty matching. For example, the first one, you can find the resources will be the ore, and how to collect them will be grinding the ores, and how to consume them will be player will sell the ore and to upgrade tools. And for the second game, the resources will be wood, and how to collect them will be chopping trees, and how to consume them will be used to unlock new land, the, the expansion. And the last one, the resources will be moon barrel, or let's say moon oil, and how to collect them will be stacking. You stack in the barrel, you collect them, and how to consume them will be the unlocking new facilities in the game. So these loop pretty much works for some heat idle arcade games. And right now, we would like to take you further and dive into the each step of this core loop. Especially, let's start with the collecting of these resources. As mentioned, this collection needs to be engaging enough and providing enough ASMR feeling. Then we try to summarize the most commonly used approach to generate such feeling. and we find two approaches here. The first one is destroying, all kinds of destroying, including chopping trees, grinding, scrapping, melting, sucking, cleaning, and actually from a psychology aspect, destroying something is always relaxing and chill for everyone. So it naturally becomes a solid way of collection. And the second approach is collecting and stacking. Because if you want to collect resources directly and you want to and strengthen this feedback for player, stacking will be the best tool to use that. Stacking makes everything orderly and regular, and also it can show the decrease and the increase of the resources in a very visible way. That's why it's working in many idle arcade titles. And right now, if you try to find some idle arcade prototypes in the market, you can see a lot of them. They're using stacking as the main approach. We would like to say this will be the most creative part for idle arcade games, the collection of the resources, that what approach you want a player to use to collect them and grant them ASMR feeling is so important. For developers who want to explore and try other arcade games, you should think about what can be tweaked and innovated in these approaches. That would be the key, because actually you want to make hit games instead of just copy from the others using the previous collection approach, because that will make your CPI very high, right? And here we are going to share you two case study. One is from our side, the other one is from the market side. We see that how this innovation is happening to this resources collection in idle arcade games. The first one is about our own case study, which is a stone miner, and how we innovate the mining collection, and how we accurately find the creativeness of this destroying behavior. So first, when the studio proposed this idea to us under our guidance, we already noticed that there are many mining games in the market, especially ourselves already published a very successful digging game, so we're becoming very cautious to this one. But to us, we never think these ideas are similar or the same, because we are always trying to identify the difference among them. For example, these two are the some prototypes we see in the market already using the digging and the mining. The first one, this binding is about making the resources as one target, and player is about to remove the ore from the stone, and the stone will get smaller and smaller. It's like getting chopped because they're using low poly graphics, and that's the mining collection for this one. And the second one we see is like this. Actually, this one is very similar to our idle digging, because both games they're making the resources to a large area, and they both use regular cubes to represent the ore, and each cubes was split to several layers, and each dig action will reduce the layer to represent this destruction progress. As to our mining connection, we found that it's very different art solution for the destroying, and that's the approach that we never see in the market. So it also made the resources as the large area, but it's using irregular cubes. And what is more important is we will enable player to use grinder to tear cubes apart and make them become smaller ones and falling and rolling on the ground, and then player gonna collect them. So it's very different. And after identifying this part, we just told studio to directly proceed with this one. And after testing, we find the metrics are just so potential. And the second case we would like to share with you guys is about stacking. how we find the stacking collection is evolving in the market. So the first moon game is pretty much the first one in the market who is using stacking as collection, and it gained its success in the market. It used very exaggerating stacking to magnify the ASMR feeling when stacking. Right? So it's a very nice shot. And the second game is about the animal collecting and fighting. It tweaked the regular stacking to a different way, which is crowd stacking, like a gangster or like the crowd city and that IO game. Player can stack animals and animals will get more and more and just following you, which made a very clear progression in the game. Right? And the third one, which is the recent idle arcade potential game in the market, it also, it doesn't use the regular stacking as well. Instead, it starts to stack shopping bags on your arm. It's a very neat idea actually. It's using irregular stacking and also it's catering female users and it's pretty much reproduce the shopping scenarios. So it's very friendly for a female to understand. Okay. So as you can see that even though these games, these heat games, they're still using stacking, right? But they're making their innovation and also made the combination between resources and also the way of stacking, try to match them. So they made their success. Our suggestion for students to understand better in this part is please make innovation to your way of collection. For example, if you see the stacking of the shopping bags with the arm, and our publishing team ever discussed this one and we're just discussing, does that mean that many stacking approach explored in runner games, some of them can also be used for idle arcade, right? Because some stacking are very catchy and also some are very physical stackings and also show great progression, right? Maybe. So it's very good to explore some new stacking approaches. So these are the two ways we want to show you guys how to make the innovation and the tweaks about the way of collecting resources, right? Then we go to the uh, third step of this core loop, which is the consumption of resources. Actually, this part is rather simple because there are some certain template you can use resources. One is for the currencies, the other one is for upgrades, or you can just use the resources to expand something in your game. Right? But there are one principles we would like to share with you guys, which is the consumption of resources should provide immediate and strong feedback. For example, upgrades, and you should not only consume the resource, but you should also show the appearance and change, or the expansion and the progression in the game. You should make the number decreasing animation or the resources flying animation, and all this can give player a very good and positive feedback to continue the loop and stay longer in your game. So these are also very very important. Then back to this loop again. We think this part is the most important to idle arcade games, especially when you want to make a hit game. We ever encounter studios pitching their ideas, and the GDD is a very, very long one. They're trying to loop pretty much everything in the game. For example, players gonna collect resources A, resources B, resources C, and then they're gonna craft something. And after crafting, they also need to battle and to fight with some enemies. A lot of content, but when testing it, both user experience and the testing metrics are not very good because there are just so many content in the game and it will certainly distract players. And not to say that in the video ads you can really make player catchy for your game because there are so many content to show in the game, right? So, in other words, to our opinion, we think that idle arcade games are still very similar to the production of hyper casual. You need to concentrate on this loop, and you need to make tweak and innovation to this loop and verify it first before you dive further into the the full development of this game. It's very important. Okay, so the last feature we would like to share as the deconstruction of idle arcade game will be the strong monetization. As you can see that idle arcade games has very long playtime, so it certainly has more ceiling for stronger monetization. But here for this part, I wouldn't talk too much because actually it will be a very tricky step. Mm, and also, if the previous core loop and resources are built up in a very solid way, actually monetization will only decide whether a game can earn more money and be more profitable for a longer time, right? But actually, the best practice is to find a publisher who knows how to build comprehensive monetization for a game and also guide your game to optimize the better uh, economy in your game, right? And also push the monetization as high as possible, right? And here I'll just briefly introduce what we did in our game in Stone Miner, right? So pretty much you can see we're using all the monetization um, approach. Let's say it's something like a hybrid ones, but still as takes larger part in the game. We have interstitials, we have banner, and we have rewarded videos, and also we have in-app purchase implemented in our game. We provide a lot of packs and also consumable items. Right. To be more specific, we try to introduce hard currency in the game, and also we try to introduce a very important feature with the card with the video in the game that player can unlock the card system, so that player don't need to get back and forth for a long distance, and it becomes very convenient and very useful to players. And this reward video becomes one of the most effective reward video in the game. And also when we put put it into the in-app purchase items, it boosted revenue as well. As you can see that this miners pack already took pretty much like 30% of the total in-app purchase revenue, which is very impressive one, right? So that's pretty much for the deconstruction part of idle arcade and our understanding. And here are some tips for studios. The first one, don't think too big. Focus on the core loop. Focus on the most entertaining part you're gonna present with player and make it clear and make it understandable. You're pretty much nailing that. And the second step, be creative about resources. Please be bold about the resources you're going to use in your game and try to avoid using some already saturated ones. For example, like wood chopping or grass cutting, you probably can already achieve some better playtime or retention, but it's very hard to generate a low CPI in your game, right? And the last tip would be try to find and add a smart feeling in collection. It will make your idea more potential when you are when you are trying to produce that. All right. So that's pretty much about my sharing about idle arcade games, and I hope this sharing will be inspiring and helpful for you guys. And thanks again for watching and listening.
Ted, hello. Thank you very much for your speech. It was really informative and very much to the point with very practical steps everyone can just take and implement. Thank you for that. Now, we have
No
several
problem.
questions. Thank you. We have several questions from from our viewers, and I'll read the first of them. What is the best collect scenario for idle shooting games?
Idle shooting games, right?
Yeah,
Hmm,
idle
that's a
shooting.
good question. Yes, that's a good question. So the scenario for idle shooting games, actually, this is also one of the topics discussed in Zplay team. And if you're asking our suggestions, then we would like to say you should give a scenario for player that they are defending something. That's one option, or they are tackle some missions like a moving forward, like a squad. The previous hit game, like you can always guard them to move forward and finish some missions or requests. That can also be a good option.
Thank you so much. Good. A very abstract question. So it seems like what's going now with video games is pretty similar to the video games early era when there were arcades at the very beginning of video games, and then they became more and more complicated. Seems like at a certain point the history dropped down to arcades back to hyper casual games, and they continue to evolve and become more and more complex. Do you see some similarities in this evolving history? Is there something we can take and implement from the history of video games, implement into the hyper casual games?
Okay. Actually, the previous famous or very classic arcade games can always be a source for the inspiration of a hyper casual developer, because they are so classic and they are so well known. And just like famous IPs, as long as this thing has huge audience, so that the CPI, that when audience see this thing in your video ads, they will be attracted because they think, oh, that's something familiar to me. I'm going to try with that, right? So a suggestion from this side is be sure to always check the previous famous or classic gameplays that you ever played, like Nintendo games or classic arcade games, shooting or any others. They can always be one of the inspiration for new tweaks, because you are working hyper casual. You are always know, okay, what the market needed right now. But sometimes you play some previous games, you can always get some new thoughts from them.
Thank you very much, Ted. Another question. What you mentioned low CPI as a key point, but what if we get a pretty good retention on day one, but the
Mm,
CPI is pretty high? Should we iterate this game or should we kill it?
mm, good question. So um, that's a really nice question, because it will be a dilemma on that, right, for developers. Our suggestion is that you should try to iterate only through the video ads, right? Try to dig out if there's any scenario you can further explore, like is maybe the camera angle, maybe the progression, maybe the ASMR feeling, right? Or maybe the main character. You can try to change them and try to see if the CPI can be changed dramatically, right? Because I think uh, when you are facing this dilemma, the CPI should be very high, right? But the retention should be very solid, right? Then try to put some effort to the tweaking of the CPI video only. Don't change the game, right? Just change the CPI video only and see if it has some effects. If no, I guess 90% you're gonna abandon this game, because um, we're actually even though we're talking about idle arcade game, is still part of the hyper casual. You still need to consider the scalability, because if you can't really compare with the RPG game, MMO games, the art style is totally different. So you have to consider whether this game can be really scaled. If no, then you should kill them. That's the reasonable way.
Thank you so much, Ted. Your speech was really amazingly practical and clear and simple, but complicated the same way. Meaning it solved the pretty complicated questions in a very simple and clear manner. We do appreciate that. Thank you so much. Our time is over. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Alex, for organizing this amazing meeting. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Have a great day. Bye bye.